Hello, welcome to the Jack and Dan show. Welcome, Dan Cook. Dan, let him cook. How are you today?
I'm doing good, JK. So this technically, I would say my debut. I've done deadline day streams with you before, but I've never been actually on the J&J show.
It's incredible, and not only is it you're here on your debut, it's your birthday as well. So happy birthday as well.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic stuff. You're probably wondering where Joe Sansom is. We just couldn't quite work it out this week. I was just saying to you off air, like the week leading up to this, the the end of the international break going into the next game, I always feel very discombobulated. I don't really know what's going on. Feel very out of touch with everything. Obviously, we've got the press conferences tomorrow, and we're back into the swing of things. But Fulham are in a very good place right now, but no one's really talking about it because there's been internationals and Nations League, and but now obviously we go into this game against Wolves, and we realistically, are looking at 3 wins in a row if we were to win on Saturday.
Yeah, I I quite like an international break actually, and I used to hate them, but I quite like the opportunity to sit back, take stock, chill out a little bit. I think obviously it gets so intense, and we've got such an intense run of fixtures coming up as well post Wolves that I do think this weekend's pretty important actually. As you say, opportunity to get through on the bounce, but also looking past this game, there are fewer wins on the horizon. So it feels like we've got to pick up those wins now, and before we hit that December, which is just mental.
It's a horrible run of fixtures, but we're coming off the end of a run of fixtures which have been fairly kind to us. After Villa, we played, was it Everton, and then we had Brentford, and then we had Palace, and now we have Wolves. Obviously, Wolves languishing down in the relegation zone are off the back of their first win of the season against Southampton, which was vitally important for them to get their season sort of up and running. Does that sort of bring this game into more importance because Wolves will be basically like, well, we've got our first win now. Let's go to Fulham and really give it a go and try and get back-to-back wins. And against the Fulham team, who have only lost one game at home this season, I don't necessarily think this is going to be a very, very easy game for Fulham at all. I think Wolves are actually, I was saying this yesterday on my own channel, that they're better than what their points have been what their points tally has been so far this season.
Yeah, I think Wolves are a really tricky one, and I've been thinking about this, and they provide conflicting thoughts to me. I think three things are weirdly true of this Wolves side from the way I look at them. One, I think they've got a really pretty decent squad in certain areas. The area that we'll probably touch upon that they don't is at the back. But when you look at their midfield and their front line, I think they're pretty strong. However, I don't think they're particularly good, and I think their league table position shows that. But the final weird thing about them is that they probably shouldn't be as low down as they are, because they have actually played well in a lot of games. I've seen them quite a lot this season, and they have deserved more points. But there are also games where I've watched them where they look poorly coached to me at the moment. There's a lack of cohesion in that team, and it's not helped by having so many injuries, particularly in the back line. But I think that also comes from bad squad planning. I think they've not recruited that smartly throughout the summer. And actually, if you even go back before that, I think this is a bit of a long running issue where you've had a little bit of player churn, and they've not necessarily had the right people coming in off the back of that. And so, like, for example, one of the games that really sticks out to me, I don't know if you watched it, but it was Wolves against Crystal Palace, which was the 2-2 draw. And I thought that was actually that two really teams that looked poorly coached in that period of time. It was a scrappy game, lots of mistakes, ball being given away, end-to-end stuff. And I think we showed ourselves to be better coached than Crystal Palace going into the international break. And so you sort of hope we can maybe just keep that theme going and just put out another dominating performance.
I read yesterday that one of their centre backs in Santiago Bueno might be a doubt for the game. They play it 3 at the back with 2 wing backs. So it was Bueno, Dawson, and Totti Gomez with wing backs of Semedo and Ait-Nouri. Obviously, Fulham have flying fullbacks as well that like to bomb forward. This is going to be quite an interesting game of sort of how we can exploit the space in behind when they do get forward, and if we can hit them on transition. And obviously, Fulham have got some really, really strong runners down the middle of the pitch. You've got Emil Smith-Rowe, Andreas Pereira, and then obviously you get to the wide areas, and we've seen so far this season that Nelson and Iwobi, and even, of course, Adama Traore, which they'll know all about, very strong runners on the ball. So there really is an opportunity for us to sort of, I wouldn't say catch them out, but basically exploit that space that they're going to leave once they put those fullbacks up very, very high. But the same could be said for Wolves, when obviously Robinson and Tete get very, very high up. There's going to be space for them to counter. So do you think this game is going to be frantic? Because we've seen quite a lot of frantic games at the Cottage already this season.
I hope not, because I think a more controlled game gives Fulham a better opportunity of winning this. If we can do what we do properly, get our key players on the ball and really just dictate the game and just push this Wolves team back. We did it we did it against Palace. We did it in the home game prior to that against Brentford, and obviously it took something special at the end. But for that whole game, really, the game was played in Brentford's half. And I think I would hope to see something similar here. It obviously means you've got to be careful against the counter-attack. And I think in players like Mateus Cunha, who is such a superb driver with the ball, the way he picks up the ball and he's able to carry that Wolves team up the pitch, we've got to be careful at that. And I think that's where you don't want that sort of end-to-end frantic game, because I think that suits a lower quality team in the game between two. So I think we really should be trying to assert our dominance. I think, as you said, if Santi Bueno is injured and is unable to play or unable to start, it puts their defence in all sorts of trouble, because they've only got 3 centre-backs, including him, fit at the moment. Yeah. And if they're playing 3 at the back, suddenly you're looking at probably a young player stepping in to try and replace Santi Bueno, which causes even more issues. And I think we saw that happen for this Wolves side. I was having a look at some of the players they've got on the bench, and I think it's Alfie Pond is probably the next likely player to come in, who's a 20-year-old who was out on loan last season. And it's just such a great opportunity, isn't it? Like these are the sort of things you want to hear going into a game. A team who is in the relegation zone, they're missing key players. Pressure's on us. I think it almost feels like for Wolves, I think they're going to turn up. I think they'd probably take a draw, but it's on us to control this game.
Someone messaged the Telegram earlier today saying that Fulham's odds were extremely short for the game. I think it was something like 8-13, which is quite crazy. I think there's a lot of expectation now about Fulham from the wider footballing world, that especially at home against a team like Wolves, that we should win. Not to quote Gary Neville, but this is the banker. I wouldn't necessarily say that Fulham beating Wolves is a banker at the weekend. I do, obviously, with my sort of Fulham hat on, have sort of a pessimistic view of things, and things can go wrong. And because we're fans of our club and we know what we're capable of doing when we don't perform at our best, but people are backing us, and I think that people are seeing us as a real. I've seen a couple of articles. I saw an article from Opta this morning about how Marco's turned things around from a yo-yo team to European contenders, which you could have said maybe even 2 seasons ago when we were up there. But I suppose we hadn't got the yo-yo sort of tag off our back by then. Now we definitely have. Do you think they are overestimating us or underestimating us, the bookies?
I think in this game, I think we're probably priced up fairly. Okay. Given where we're at and given where Wolves are at, Fulham are favourites. It is so hard to try and take a step back from being a Fulham fan and assess this game. But if I was thinking about, if I was having a dabble on this weekend, having a look through the accumulators, I wouldn't be tempted to put my money on Wolves. And those are famous last words. And I think, as I've said, there are some players in there that I really like. There's some players in this Wolves squad who I think are superb. I.e. Nori, as an example. Potentially the first or second best left back in the league, depending on where you want to put Anthony Robinson.
I would say the same. Yeah, definitely.
So I think that's one thing that works massively in their favour. Now, having potentially the best player in your team as your left wing back, maybe he's not a great sign of strength, but he's still very dangerous. I think he scored against us last season at Molineux. He's got the ability to drift in off that left flank and cause problems. So I think there are ways they can hurt us. As I said, mentioned Mateus Cunha. I think Jorgen Strand-Larsen has had a slightly understated but decent start to his career at Wolves. I think he's something that they've lacked since Raul went cold for them. After his injury, someone who is just a little bit of a fox in the box, and I think that's what Strand-Larsen is. He just hasn't had a huge amount of service. But you weigh that up and you look player by player through these two teams. We just look stronger to me.
Yeah,
and that doesn't necessarily mean 3 points, but it does mean that we should be favourites. If I was looking at wider, how are we priced over or under, or considered, are we overrated or underrated? I think it's a tricky one because I'm trying to remain level-headed at the moment, and whilst I think Europe is a possibility, and I think 8th or above there's a chance.
Mm-hmm.
I think so many things would have to go perfectly for Fulham in order for us to hit that. And I think this run of fixtures will be crucial to that. If we pick up a win against Wolves, I don't think that signals, overall where our season's going to end. It's, can we get points away at Spurs? Can we pick up points again this season off Arsenal? It's those games against the teams above us that I think will ultimately decide where we fall.
No, I agree. And I look at the run of fixtures after the Wolves game, and I'm feeling fairly confident that Fulham can be competitive in every single one of those games, at least. I really don't see a situation where I can't even remember a game. Not even. I think we've been competitive in every single game this season. The ones we've lost, Man United, Villa, and Manchester City, we should have got more from that game. We had a penalty that we missed. We were poor with our final decision making against Man United, and we should have beat City. I mean, I'll get it tattooed on my forehead. We should have beat them, but we didn't. But we showed that we can be competitive, and that was against Man City, who are so good at nullifying opposition and dominating games. And I'm looking ahead to the Spurs game next week, a team who are just incredibly erratic and incredibly high line, and I think we're going to get a whole lot of chances there, and I think we'll get a positive result. Obviously, they lost to Ipswich last time out as well, so confidence going into that game. Let's just focus on Wolves, though. Let's think of the team. I personally think we'll be unchanged. I think there's all these calls for Harry Wilson to come in, and I absolutely 100% agree. And I think that him in the number 10 is obviously a very good weapon to have. But I do think Pereira had a very good game against Palace, a better than usual game. And I think he's worthy of keeping his place. I think the balance of the team right now is very, very good. Even if Sasha Lukic is ready to come back into the fold, I don't necessarily think that Sander Berge should be displaced. I think that he definitely should still start. He's put in some really strong performances. What do you think? Is there any changes you'd make, even with Muniz maybe, or Raul Jimenez up front?
I think you've got to stick with Raul at the moment. I think his performances have been impressive. He scored again for Mexico over this international break, which it's just fantastic to see. But I think it's been more than the goals for Raul recently. I think there's just little zaps, little moments of I remember this player. I remember this guy. And if anything, I think almost like hold up play that's an improvement on where he potentially was pre-injury. I never saw him as a target number 9. I always thought Raul was much more in the box, poacher, good finisher. I think Marco's been working on this ability to hold up the play, and I think that's improved immensely over the past year and a half now. So I think you stick with Raul. I really don't know what I think about our midfield three. I think I know what Marco Silva's going to do, which I think he's not going to change it. I think you're right. I think it'll be Sander Berge, it'll be Pereira, it'll be Smith Rowe. And you don't deviate from that because it served us well against Palace. And also coming up against what is likely going to be a midfield 2, you think that we've got legs in there and quality in there to both overrun that midfield, but also I think you want 2 attack-minded midfielders alongside Sander Berge because we're probably going to have a lot of the ball. And so you want players in there who are trying to unpick a defence. And I think Pereira and Smith Rowe do that. Whether I want that to be the midfield three is a really tricky question. I just don't know. I really don't know, because I'm really hesitant to try and axe Pereira from this midfield, because I still think that there is a lot of stuff that he does that goes unnoticed, and you only notice Pereira and like what the things he does when he's not playing. There are certain things in terms of like the running, the pressing, also just the availability. I think he's got better and better at being available to receive the ball. You notice those things when he's not playing, and sometimes they go unnoticed when he's on the pitch, which means he gets underrated. So I think I would also want the midfield three to stay the same. I understand the Harry Wilson shouts, and actually I think I'm starting to become converted. I didn't want him to start against Palace, but the fact that he came on, and let's say for argument's sake, he basically scored two, because that handball's unfortunate, and it ultimately he has had the impact that could have seen him score two goals. He's then scored an absolute perler for Wales over the international break and contributed really strongly. I wonder if you've just got a player who in this moment in time is just like fizzing and is unstoppable, and maybe you've just got to capitalise on that. And probably the only person I think that I would switch out for him is Reiss Nelson, but that feels like a really tough call.
Yeah.
Because Reiss has been so impactful and impressive, and his ability to get at a man is probably going to be useful again if you're coming up against a team that might sit back against us. But I don't know what you think, but Harry Wilson feels like he's in that sort of form where if you don't capitalise now, it may just fizzle out, and we may have missed the opportunity. If it doesn't work, fine. You bring on Reiss Nelson, you bring on Traore, but maybe now's the time to just give him that opportunity.
It's really difficult, because you're basically saying now that you'd like Wilson to start, but off the left, basically.
No, I would shift Iwobi back out.
Oh,
left.
okay.
So the system that you would have had previously with Traore on the right and Iwobi on the left, I would shift Harry Wilson back out to his natural right side position, let him cut in on his left foot. He's played a couple of times out on the left, but I don't think that's where you get the best of him, really, is it?
Apologies. So he's out on the right, and then you've got Iwobi on the left, and then Smith Rowe and Pereira as the 8 and the 10, with Sander Berge as the 6. And I would like to see Wilson start. Like, I think everyone wants to see him start, but we're in a moment right now where Nelson is on the form. I wouldn't say the form of his life, but his bursts of pace, his energy has been very, very vital. His decision making can improve, and I think Wilson's decision making in that position might be slightly better. You've got a Iwobi, incredibly strong runner, can drift inside, and he's been fantastic. I just think that the form of this team right now is so good, the continuity is so good, that I think that Marco may just put an arm around Harry and say, you're going to be the impact sub, with Adama Traore as well. So that's 2 impact subs, and hopefully Muniz makes a 3rd. And suddenly, at the beginning of the season, I looked at the bench and I thought, yeah, there's a couple of good options we could bring off the bench. But now we've seen the proof of what they could do off the bench. Muniz against City, Traore against Brentford, and Wilson, of course, against Brentford and Palace. They can make direct impacts on this game. I like the idea of starting them off the right, but I just think that that sort of early pace you need to get in the box, and obviously playing Nelson on the left and combining with Robinson with Iwobi on the right, I just think it's going to create more opportunity for us. And I do think that obviously Emile Smith Rowe still is not up to speed, still hasn't played 90 minutes, I don't think. And Pereira obviously gets dragged off the pitch at like 65 minutes as well. You bring Wilson on in that situation, and it's just those sort of that burst of energy he brings down the middle, and that's perfect. Like the example of the goal he scored against Palace, or the one that at least counted, of him making that run and no one really tracking him, and then Iwobi finding him. It's that little burst of energy that you need at 70 minutes, and then that's not even mentioning Adama Traore, who Wolves know all about. And then you bring him on against tired legs, and you know what he can do. Like, he's just incredibly good at that. As much as I agree with you that I want Wilson to start, I just feel like there's not a place for him to start right now, because everyone else is playing very, very well, and the continuity in this team is very good. But I do want him to start.
I do also think that you lose, interestingly with Wilson, I think starting him, you actually lose one impact sub. And the reason being, you then have to pick between Reece Nelson and Adama Traore. If you need
Yeah.
to inject some impetus and Harry Wilson's coming off, I think at the moment, from what we've seen of Reece Nelson, he's a wide player who you probably wouldn't throw him on to play that Harry Wilson's new sort of number 10 role. And Adama Traore, absolutely, you would only ever play out on the flank. By starting Wilson out there, then you've got to pick come 60 or 70 minutes. Marcus Silva then has to pick between Reece Nelson or Traore. Whereas if one of those two starts, then you've actually got the option to bring on both Harry Wilson and the other, because you can shift Harry Wilson into the 10 and you can you can bring on fresh legs out wide. Whereas I think you limit yourself potentially by starting Harry Wilson, because, you know, are you going to move him into the 10 and bring off Smith Rowe? Feels unlikely. So it's really, and I feel bad for him. I think you'd have seen it as well, Marco Silva's apology to Harry Wilson after the Brentford game, after his heroics. It was such a lovely, like, human moment to see. And it's clear that Marco's trying to do everything he can. But when you've got 11 players, and it's not even 11 players at the moment, is it? It's probably 14 players, 15 players who are all putting down a legitimate case to start because they're all performing at a very good level. You've got to make tough decisions.
It's obviously it's a good problem to have, as every manager would say. And then you've got Sasha Lukic coming back in as well, which is just another great option. The squad's in a great place. What I will say is that this sort of game turnaround where we've got Spurs and then Brighton on the Thursday, then Arsenal on the Sunday, there's definitely a case for Wilson to start in one of those games, because you're going to have to rotate anyway. And that might just see like Castagna start. That might see Jorge Cuenca start a game. I mean, because these are going to be very intense games. It's not like we're playing, it's not like the Championship where it's like Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday. We're playing teams that we should beat. This is, you know, Spurs, Brighton, Arsenal, these top teams who perform very, very highly at the Premier League in recent years and recent seasons. So there's definitely going to be a Harry Wilson start, whether that be on the right, whether that be in the 10. We shall see. Let's get on to a score prediction then, just to finish. We're both very, very confident. I'm going to start by saying I think Fulham will win by 2-1. Mateus Cunha is a player that is scaring me. Bruno Larson obviously knows where the net is. Sarabia scored at the Cottage a couple of years ago. Very, very good player. I actually really like the midfield too, Lamina and João Gomez. We haven't even mentioned Andre. He's coming to the Cottage for what feels like it should have been back in August, but he's what would you make of that? Actually, do you think there's going to be any sort of narrative around Andre coming? I genuinely think, because he's not right now in the starting 11, he's actually been dropped to the bench. I think it's a bit of a non-story.
I don't know. I think that it's inevitable that there'll be some chat, just because there was a bit of a division through the fan base, wasn't there, over the summer, because there were some who were screaming for Andre, and then there were others who were less keen. And so I think there's one half of the fan base that almost wants him to play well enough to prove that they were right. And there's the other half who would love to see him not come onto the pitch at all, because they'll say, well, he's not good enough for relegation fighting Wolves. He was never going to be good enough for Fulham. I don't think it's that simple. And I think he's been handed a little bit of a tough gig in this Wolves side. You know, he probably would have seen where they finished last season and thought he was coming into a team that would perform similarly to Fulham. And he's actually playing in that Wolves team at the moment, particularly because of those defensive issues, is really hard as a defensive midfielder, right? As a deeper midfielder, trying to protect the back line and also dictate the tempo of the game is tough when you're playing for a team that's getting beaten week in, week out. So I think there'll be a little bit of chat. I also agree. He probably won't start. I think that is actually dependent on whether Santi Bueno is fit, because Gary O'Neill will have to make the decision: do you stick with 3 at the back and play a 20-year-old at centre back, or potentially, and I genuinely wouldn't be surprised to see this, shift Mario Lamina into the back 3, because Lamina has shown this versatility, and I'm pretty certain he's played there before, not starting berth, but shifted in there in a game. He's the sort of player that fans love, because he will, you know, you'd stick the gloves on him, he'd give it a good good go and he'd give it his all. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that, and then that potentially opens a berth for Andre. But at the moment, it feels unlikely that he'll start. It's also probably not the game for him because I think Fulham are going to dominate possession, and maybe he's not the player you want when you're having 35-40% possession.
If Lamina was to start at centre back, it'd be the second game in a row where they're playing a player basically out of position with Gehi playing in midfield for Palace. Yeah. So what's your score prediction then for the game?
Do you know what? It's terrible, but I was feeling a little bit more brash than you. I think we've got goals in us. I think we keep threatening to score 3 or 4. So I'm going to one up you. I'm going to say 3-1. Okay. I think this is one that I know that this is so risky, and we risk comments here come Saturday at 5 p.m. for all the Wolves fans. My best mate is a Wolves fan, and he will certainly be giving it both barrels if I'm wrong. But I think I can see goals in this Fulham team now. It's ticking. We're creating chances. We should have scored more against Palace. We should have scored more against Brentford. Maybe this is the game where we do get the goals that we deserve, given the chances we're creating.
The shackles are off. I remember this time last year, quite literally this time last year, not knowing where the next goal was going to come from. I think it might have been this time last year. We might have just been off the back of a defeat to Villa, where we scored. I'd already left the ground by then, but we did score. But it felt as if there were no goals in this team. And that goal I missed, and maybe many missed, was the catalyst that basically sprung us on to win 5-0, 5-0. And I think you're right. I think there is a thrashing in us at some point. If anything, it should have been Palace with the 2 disallowed goals. I think it's coming. I don't necessarily think it's going to come against Wolves or then, Spurs, Brighton, Arsenal, obviously Liverpool. But I think it's coming. And I suppose this is the best opportunity to get it. But I cannot sit here right now and say I think Fulham are going to win the game 4-0, 5-0, because that's just an outlandish sort of prediction. Joe Sanson sends his regards, and he predicts 3-1 with Jimenez, Iwobi, Nelson, and Mateus Cunha on the goal on the score sheet. 2-1, I think Jimenez will score. I think Smith Rowe will score the winner after they've equalised. So,
interesting.
Dan, it's been an absolute pleasure. This has been fantastic. Maybe we should just do the Jack and Dan show forever.
I absolutely loved it. Always happy to come on it. We'll all take any opportunity to speak about Fulham, won't we?
Yeah, honestly, it's a great pleasure. Obviously, I'm not doing a disservice to Joe. Obviously, Joe is fantastic, and I'm looking forward to speaking to him next week ahead of Tottenham. And I feel very confident for Tottenham away. I know we shouldn't really be looking ahead, but I feel very, very confident, just given the way Fulham are playing, the way Tottenham are playing, and just how the season's sort of panning out so far. Any final thoughts before we call it a day?
No, I think just looking forward to this. We've had a little bit of a break. And I I hope other people feel the same, but I really cannot wait to get down to Craven Cottage on Saturday. I'm really looking forward to being in the back of H5 and getting up for another game.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is the best time of the season for me, where the international break's over and you got this sort of full steam ahead all the way to March and all the Christmas festivities and football. It's just great. Football's basically on every day. You've got the darts. I mean, it's just the most wonderful. That's why they call it the most wonderful time of the year, don't they?
Absolutely. That's where the saying came from.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks so much for being here. And please do subscribe to the channel. I think we've reached like 5,500 subscribers now, which is fantastic. Or maybe it's 6,500 actually. I'm doing ourselves a disservice. So let's try and get up to 7 before the end of the year. Thanks so much for watching, and come on Fulham.